Okay, go.
Okay, we're going to start now. And thank you all for coming. And so this is a panel about zines and publishing. It's going to include several individual presentations and then a conversation and then a Q&A question at the end. So your order of speakers is going to be Marissa with a lecture, the paper, and then Isabel, Suzy, Maribel, and Daisy. And then they'll tell you all about their work. And it'll be amazing. So thank you for coming. And additionally, just a side note, they've definitely heavily fundraised to come here, so it's definitely a problem that probably should be addressed in future Latino Art Nows about artist funding, that it's not a suggestion, but it's a requirement at this point. So yeah, things to consider for future suggestions and conferencing and paneling. So our first speaker is going to be Marissa del Toro. She graduated with an MA in Art History from the University of Texas at San Antonio, with an overall focus on the modern and contemporary art of Latin American and U.S. artists. Her current research involves the artistic representation and framework of Latinx identity through zine production. Currently, Del Toro is the DAMLI Curatorial Fellow at Phoenix Art Museum. In both her professional and personal life, she continues to work towards the promotion and advocacy for diverse narratives within art. Recently, Del Toro worked at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art as a new curatorial support group coordinator. And in July 2015, she participated in the Latino Museum Studies program at the Smithsonian Latino Center, where she worked on museum collections and exhibitions within the National Museum of American History. Please join me in welcoming Marissa.
Is there like a, or should I just go over there and click? Okay, let's go over there and click. So thank you, Claudia, for the introduction and for all the panelists and for all of you being here today. I know, the last session, woohoo, we made it. So thank you. And yeah, I mean, like, my research is not feasible without these zinesters who are doing the work, the hard work of putting their vulnerability out there, putting their art out there. And so I just want to, thank you all for doing this. So my research started about 3 years ago. I started as a collector about 6 years ago. I originally started finding zines via Tumblr, social media, in a weird way, compared to doing the material paper-based that most people do. And I just had questions about zines, zinesters, what inspired them to share their art, what was it all about. So this is really just me, my personal curiosity, just emailing random zinesters, how did you do this, why, So this is kind of based on oral histories, interviews, but also looking at interviews that they did online too. There's been a boom in interest within the zine world, specifically of Latinx zines. So just to begin, collective of artists and zinesters based in the U.S. are using the folds of paper as a site to carve out space for underrepresented identities and artistic production, but at the same time, address contemporary social, political, and feminist issues affecting them. And this is coming from a local, regional, and national perspective. Several of the prominent collective and zinesters that are creating these platforms are Santa Sucia, ChifladaZine, Yes Ma'am, Cósmica Colectiva, Horchata, ChifladaZine, and La Liga. And today I'll be talking about Horchata, ChifladaZine, and La Liga. But I also want to acknowledge that all these collectives are predominantly contributed by women, especially women of color, and Latinx identity. And they are all predominantly led by women of color too, so that's very significant. The contemporary use of zines by the aforementioned zine collectives are creating, folding, and producing a visual art and text as a platform from diverse perspectives. My presentation today looks to discuss their strategies, and acts that address an array of social, political, and feminist issues through the works of Horchata, Liga, and ChifladaZine. I also seek to acknowledge how these collectives are part of fourth wave feminism, also known as digital feminism, that can be broadly defined as the use of technology and social media. Lastly, my presentation also recognizes how their feminism and artivism goes beyond cyberspace in the digital sphere of social media via its manifestations into real-world actions by creating platforms and taking up space through community participation via leading workshops, talks, or poetry readings, and tabling. So for just like a definition of like, what are zines? Also Zines, I've heard that, said several times, and it's okay. So just a definition, according to Stephen Duncombe, author of Notes from Underground, Zines and the Politics of Underground Culture, quote, zines are non-commercial, non-professional, small circulation magazines, which their creators produce, publish, and distribute themselves. Zines are self-published original material with usually DIY aesthetics and designs, traditionally created from appropriate text and images. They're usually photocopied, so thinking of kind of collage as well. The agendas of zines are to distribute and disseminate a point of view traditionally in opposition to mainstream. And before I move into discussing, the collectives, the contemporary collectives, I want to briefly mention the work of another collective from the 1990s that also use zines similar to the ones discussed here today, Mujeres and Maiz. They were founded in 1997 as an indigenous mestiza-led feminist of color collective based in Los Angeles. Their zines are part of their practice of collectivity, networking, and artistic expression to create a, quote, sacred space to share their arts, words, music, and wisdom, end quote. But their zines also offered a strong feminist critique against a patriarchal society that spoke against gender violence and created a space for healing and visibility. Co-founders Felicia Montez and Claudia Mercado, who we see here pictured, as well as Margaret Giga Alacon and Gina Aparizo, joined together to create a space for women of color poets, painters, and performers to share their stories. This was later organized into a zine and multimedia performance for International Women's Day titled The Birth of La Diosa de Maiz. Throughout the years, Mujeres de Maiz has produced 14 zines and hosted numerous live performances and exhibitions, such as our most recent 20th anniversary celebration at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes in 2017 in Los Angeles. Their zine work and exhibitions have connected Mujeres across the U.S., but also from countries and cities from within Africa, Peru, the Philippines, other countries of Asia, Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, and Mexico. The Mujeres de Maiz acknowledge the power of their work in uniting individuals, but also other local collectives and organizations throughout Los Angeles. They traditionally work with other collectives and nonprofits such as Self-Help Graphics, Mujer Mugado, Tonali Gallery, and Ovarian Cycles. As a collective, they use their traditional knowledge as artistic responses to societal marginalization, neocolonialism, and ongoing racial, gender, and sexual oppressions in and beyond Chicanx and Latinx communities. According to scholar and board member of Mujeres de Maiz, Amber Rose Gonzalez, they challenge, quote, social justices, dominant cultural representations, and build meaningful communities through politically and spiritually charged art, end quote. So through their collective practices, they produce social action that brings to light silenced voices, individual and communal narratives, truths and experiences that challenges injustices and raises awareness. Gonzalez also notes that for Mujeres de Maiz and other collectives of women, zines are important sites where women of color have access to the power of speech, language, writing, and community. And in her essay, Femzines, Artivism, and Alter Aesthetics, Professor Noel Martinez acknowledges how Mujeres de Maiz, quote, interrupted Western notions of art and used an indigenous spiritual epistemology to redefine art and artists, end quote. This supported women into an elevated position of artists, which for some, they didn't recognize their work as being art or being on the level of claiming the term artist. So this interruption and positioning of their contributors as artists for Mujeres, through Mujeres and Maiz's zines is their form of artivism. So this is La Horchata, one of the contemporary zines working today. And they kind of carry this interruption of Western notions of art and elevation of artistry. They are named after creamy, milky drinks, La Horchata. It's a seasonal publication featuring artists of Central American ancestry. They're based in Washington, D.C., but many of the contributors are from across the country. They're co-founded by Veronica Melendez and Kimberly Benavides in 2017. And in a recent interview I held with both of them, we discussed the origins of La Horchata, emerging out of a need to see more Latinx representation, but specific to a Central American identity. They acknowledge and recognize that the shadowing of Central American identity within larger discussions of art, culture, history, and overall representative within mainstream U.S. society, as well as the larger conversation of Latinx identity. So while Melendez and Benavides were in school, they continually felt like they did not see themselves represented within their studies, especially within art history. There was a missing gap for a Central American identity, and they decided that if they couldn't find it themselves within the current system, then they would make it. They would create their own space for other individuals of Salvadorian, Guatemalan, and Central American artists. So for about 2 years, Melendez had been toying and discussing with Benavides the idea of creating a space via an art zine. Finally, in fall 2017, she submitted for a spot at the DC Art Book Fair. Both of them were surprised to find out that they were given a table. The one minor issue, though, they didn't officially have a zine ready, so they had 2 weeks to make it until the fair. So kind of thinking of like, rascachinissimo, you get it done within the time frame you have and the material, and they got it done. So their first issue, Otoño, was produced just in time for the book fair. It's actually a 44-page color copy paperback zine that we see here, and I actually brought it on the table, so if y'all want to check it out later. And it features the work of 6 artists, including both Melendez and Benavides. The main contributors for this issue were friends and acquaintances that they had made, reached out to in the DC metro area. And the zines are notable for including a range of artworks and mediums. Their first issue was composed of photography, graphic illustrations, embroidery, and poetry. So all of the works included in their zines draw inspiration from their diasporic identity and Central American heritage via aesthetics, topics, or themes. So here we see the embroidery work of Elizabeth Fernanda Rodriguez. And she, in her work, addresses issues of tokenization, assimilation, and microaggressions. Her works involve transfer photos that she embroiders with elements of symbolic gestures, such as a Salvadorian flag that harkens back to her homeland, or a plastic choker necklace as a reference to childhood fashion or even contemporary fashion. In an interview with Remezcla, Rodriguez notes the power of her work and is quoted saying the following: "I hope my work in the zine touches other people like me, with parents from El Salvador and Central America who may have felt a little self-hate, displacement, or need to assimilate despite being born or growing up here, and who are learning to love their roots." So her work is working through these issues as a first generation or second generation, however you define it, individual, on how that's, how our diasporic identity is existing within the U.S. and the complications of that. Here we see the vibrating illustrations from Veronica Araceli Melendez, the co-founder of La Horchata. And her graphic designs are products from everyday life, ranging from the morena canned peppers to masaca corn flour to the miracle ointment that every Latinx mom holds sacred, especially my mom. And they are nostalgic references of home and identity. The labels of these products are erased, but the memorable graphic style of the packaging function as a mnemonic device that brings back personal memories and elements of identity. These images are iconic, and some of them have a specific meaning to a Central American identity, especially for the artist, Melendez, who created them. The creation of La Horchata also coincided during a critical time within the US. In early January 2018, the Trump administration announced it would end Temporary Protected Status, TPS, a pivotal humanitarian program that allowed 200,000 Salvadoran immigrants to live and work in the US since 2001. In a roundtable discussion with NPR and US-based Salvadoran artists, Melendez participated, along with the poet Jessica Salgado, the visual artist Jessica Alvarenga, Johanna Toruna, and they spoke about their backgrounds, the impact of the then recently canceled TPS, and their work to create greater representation and space for Central American identity. Melendez spoke about the power of La Horchata in creating a space and visibility for artists and individuals of Nicaraguan, Honduran, Guatemalan, Panamanian, Costa Rican, Belizean, and Salvadoran ancestry within the US. Although the art included in their zines may not always focus on overt issues of immigration, the co-founders of La Horchata recognized the effect of immigration policy within their community and acknowledged the effect that their zines has on the Central American communities at both a local and national level. So this is ChifladaZine. It's a digital-based zine. Currently their website's not up, but they started in early 2014, San Antonio, created by Claudia Cardona, along with co-founder and co-editor Laura Valdez. And they created it because, quote, they saw a lack of Latinx representation in online publications. We wanted something that could be accessible, artsy, inspiring for Latinxes everywhere. There are a lot of publications I admire and read, and this is coming from Cardona. But in these publications, I found that there were few Latinx contributors and staff members who wanted to create an outlet for Latinx writers and artists to express themselves in various ways, end quote. So ChifladaZine takes its name from the Spanish slang for bratty, crazy, or selfish. And Cardona kind of described the reason it is called Chiflada is because she felt that maybe it is a little bratty, selfish to want a space for your art, but they're gonna embrace that and they're gonna take that space, and I really admire that within their work. So like I said, they're a digital zine and online platform that features submission-based materials such as poetry, essays, photography, and visual art that cover a range of topics such as mental health, reproductive rights, religion, and body image. Annually, they produce a physical published copy of their favorite submissions from the previous year. The online publication of ChifladaZine allowed it to be widespread and accessible from across the United States. And again, the contributors for this collective ranges from California to Texas, so they're coming from all different perspectives and walks of life. So the use of social media also contributes to the success of ChifladaZine, receiving notoriety and visibility. It was through social media that they were able to promote calls for theme submissions, new published works, and promotional events for their new releases. As I mentioned before, a lot of the collectives are women-run, and this is one of the main ones. It's a women-run platform that brings to mind their work as cyber-feminist actions. In an interview from 2015, Cardona was questioned on whether there was a cyber-feminist connection to ChifladaZine, which she responded by noting that they're all women staff, kind of just happened by chance. But she acknowledges how Latinas are predominantly overlooked or over-sexualized within media, and that it was through the social networking website Tumblr that women, feminists, and genderqueer people were able to find success. Social media and the internet gave ChifladaZine, as well as the other women-led zine collectives mentioned in this presentation, the space and access to create, discuss, and contribute to a larger network of individuals that went beyond the specificity of their physical boundaries and locations. This act of feminism is part of the fourth wave of feminism, the digital feminism, that is defined by their use of the internet and social media. Although they originated as an online presence, their crossing into the physical zine world gave greater access to their mission for Latinx representation. In 2015, they published their first physical zine. Thank you. we see here, with a print of the iconic Salina, sorry. And this was a compilation of their online submissions from summer 2014 to spring 2015. Since then, they have created a total of 3 zines, or compilations of their online published pieces, sold at nominal fees, usually around $5 per issue. By physically publishing their zines, it addresses the issue of a digital gap where some individuals may not have access to the internet for whatever political, economic, or social reason. The materiality of the printed zine also provides an accessibility and gives a physical contact to the community work that ChifladaZine is doing. It bridges the divide between the digital and physical worlds. This at times is somewhat of a rare occurrence, since social media users rarely find themselves interacting with the creator they follow, and vice versa between followers and creators. Additionally, their tabling at public events within and outside of San Antonio further contributes to their feminist act of breaking down the digital gap. And the last collective I'm talking about today is La Liga. This is another independent digital zine and online platform that is interested in the, quote, liberation and disruption of neoliberal white supremacist media outlets and monopolies, exploring pamphleting as an art practice, protest art, permanence of meaning, creating alternative economies, disrupting conocimientos, building community, and learning to hold each other accountable, end quote. And like ChifladaZine, they also produce their online work into physical publications that explore a specific range of topics and issues. Originally published in 2014 as a single Tumblr blog devoted to street style and showcasing Latinxes, La Liga transformed into a sleek graphic design website producing essays and articles covering all forms of expression, from art and music to fashion and poetry. As an online platform and print zine, their mission is focused on showcasing, quote, the many ways Latinxes, Chicanxes, Latin Americans are dissecting their cultural identities through different means of self-expression, end quote. And specifically, they're interested in de-Westernizing and decolonizing different areas of their life. They use digital and print publications, platforms to carve out space to celebrate and nurture the Latinx culture that mainstream media fails to reflect. They are also reacting to a mainstream media that fails to portray Latinx identity beyond stereotypical ethnic generalizations and tropes. They tackle strong topics such as colorism, appropriation, and decolonial strategies. Although La Liga has maintained their digital presence through social media platforms, their work has also been produced into print. In September 2016, and in celebration of their 1-year anniversary, La Liga printed and sold their first collective zine volume. This premiere issue focused on their continued work to provide a voice, a space, and media platform for Latinx identities, especially those marginalized within the communities, such as individuals who self-identify as queer, indigenous, trans, Afro-Latinx, and more. Included works for this issue address topics of social justice, fair representation, and affirmation of their identity. This page is from their first issue. It is titled Why Artists and Collectors of Color Need to Start Demanding Magazines to Pay Us for Giving Interviews, written by Luna Alvarilla Gallegos. And it addresses the mainstream media such as BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, Cosmopolitan, and Teen Vogue for publishing trendy pieces on resistant movements and co-opting social justice language for capitalistic profit. Gallegos critiques white-run collectives and media for failing to fully incorporate people of color critics and writers at the same recognition and pay rate as white individuals. She writes, quote, alternative collectives and movements are a way to create resistance to not only issues of identity and visibility, but issues of social exclusion and economic exploitation, end quote. Through their zine and digital platforms, La Liga creates a third space where the shaded overlap of two spaces, the digital realm and the real world, can be seen as a third for them to formulate, operate, and function in just as they are. Their space and platform are one of power and agency, where they use media to collectively produce visibility, demand acknowledgement for their work, but also address larger issues such as racism, colonialism, colorism, homophobia, and all within the mainstream and Latinx society. So As I begin to end my presentation, I just want to read a quote from Maureen Casana's essay, Feminisms and the Social Media Sphere. She writes that, quote, social media is that one large digital archiving domain where women can give a voice to their aspirations and make bonds with other women, materialize activism in favor of their goals and be heard. This networked feminism enables the online mobilization or coordination of feminists around the world. One may argue that in revolving around those cyberspaces, the activism of such feminism is limited and even redundant, as it is in many cases realistically speaking. But one cannot deny the importance of this online community-based feminist network that goes all over Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, WordPress, and more to combat sexism effectively, end quote. The collectives I mentioned in my presentation today, as well as the ones on this panel, are using social media and cyberspace as digital acts of resistance that disrupt Western notions of art, expand notions of Latinx identity, and make space for their voices, as well as the voices of others, to be heard. Through their digital zine actions, they provide new modes of feminist critique and collectivity of Latinidad that generates intersectional conversations of representation, resistance, and protest. Yet the materiality and physical printing of their zines fill the gaps and disparities between the digital and physical worlds. Their real-world actions of community participation, leading workshops, or holding dialogues also transcend the digital gap. Overall, their zines exist in the digital and physical worlds as third space acts for their formulation and regeneration of their identities, art, and voices to be seen and heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. So our next speaker is going to be Isabel Castro. She's a visual artist from San Antonio, Texas, and she received a BFA in Communication Design from Texas State University. Isabel is a co-founder and art director for Santa Sucia, a DIY international Latina and Latinx feminist magazine. Santa Sucia focuses is collecting, curating, and publishing contemporary Latina and Latinx writing and art. And Isabel is an organizer for San Anto Zine Fest and a zine librarian. And she's a 2018 National Association of Latino Arts and Cultures Leadership Institute Fellow. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna vote for this thing.
Okay.
I need to do that too. I'm just putting it in order. Okay.
Are you sure it doesn't go?
That's fine. We're running out of time. Okay, what's up, everybody? My name is Isabel Castro. I'm from San Antonio, from the South Side. I make zines, and I'm also an illustrator. Just to tell you more about my work. If I go down, here we go. So this is some of my personal work. I am a full-time illustrator. It's been doing it for 2 years. It's really terrible. There's like no boundaries between like sleep and work and like your family because I work at home. But I like partnering with people who are doing the same work I am, like trying to create work and spaces for Latinx folks. And so it's like, you know, flyers for the Vinyl Club, writing workshops, even just documenting like everyday San Antonio party life with a dude holding 4 beers. Jeremy at Zapata Wall. I partner with Planned Parenthood South Texas a lot. And then like more illustrations of like the Juan Gabriel event that was here in Houston, that like doing the zine has like really connected me to an online community outside of San Antonio. And so someone was following me and they're like, hey, can you do this flyer for an event here in Houston? And I was down. So there's that. Hold on. Which way do I go? There we go. Okay. Here's more personal work. I've been able to work with Jumpstart and the Guadalupe, creating flyers for like Marissa Barrera, who's an awesome playwright and actress. Houston Archives Bazaar, some personal work, an album cover for my ex-boyfriend's punk band, creating work for Dia de los Muertos as like a healing process for myself. Again, like this happens tomorrow with Planned Parenthood South Texas. This old man, he's 80s, riding his bike across the Rio Grande Valley in support of reproductive health and justice, specifically for the Rio Grande Valley. And here's some work that was used for the Latino Comics Expo that happened like 2 weeks ago as their poster. I've just partnered with like NALAC. I've tried to highlight immigration, particularly voices like who are for voices from people who are doing the work. This is my friend Barbie. They are now documented, but they were really at the forefront of all of the marches that happened in San Antonio and really doing the work, and I felt like they weren't even getting paid enough at the nonprofits that they worked at, much less like respected, like very tokenized, and so I wanted to make this poster to commemorate them. And it's a little bit about my process. This is a comic that I made after we celebrated Dia de los Muertos in Mexico with my family. So I really like document and photograph. I picked that up from my grandparents. They like took pictures of everything. And so I tried to like bring all of these elements into a comic that I created that could hopefully like bring upon more healing for myself and others who, like, my dad's buried in Mexico, so like we have to create an altar at home, but we were fortunate to be able to take this trip. So I tried to take a bunch of videos, there's audio, like I have everything. But that's a little bit about my process. We started, I'm only one half of the zine, the other half is my friend Natasha Hernandez. She's really awesome, a great writer. We decided, I went up to her at a dive bar and I was like, hey, you want to make a zine where brown girls just talk shit and be honest about their experiences? Because I had come up with the name Santa Sucia in college because me and our friends were at Texas States and we were a bunch of putas and we were having a good time living our life. And they were raised Catholic and they'd hold their saints and be like, oh, I'm going on this date tonight. I hope, like, you know, he's popping, like, you know, I don't know, we're in academic space. But I was like, you can't be asking the Virgen for these things. Like, you need to say who's a dirty girl who gets it, who understands contemporary problems. And it became like this running joke, like going out and partying and waking up and your eye makeup still looks amazing. Santa Sucia has blessed you. Like, your plan B works. Like, you partied all night and then you like crammed for a test right before and then you got an A. Like, Santa Sucia had blessed you. So it was this ongoing joke that I was like, no, there's really something here that like I want to talk about and I don't know how to like put it into something. Maybe we should make a zine. And my friends are like, listen, I'm gonna be that person in a group project that doesn't do any work. So no. And so I put it on the back burner and I moved back home to San Antonio after I graduated and I met Natasha. And well, we had met because both of our boyfriends were in that same punk band, and so I'd gone to a bunch of her parties and she was a good time. And so I was like, well, I want to have a good time. So, hey, do you want to make a zine where brown girls just talk shit, be real, be very honest about all the taboo topics that are swept under the rug in our community? Like, let's be very honest about what's happening. And she said yes. So we started meeting on her porch. Oh, no. Oh, what's this? Yeah, so we put out like a call for submissions. And this is like the flyer that was made and it was a tearaway and we put it up in dive bar bathrooms like, hey, like send us your stuff. We don't care if it's like that good. Like, we know you secretly write. And one time when you were drunk, you read a poem and it was really good. Let us publish that. Send it to our email. So we got around like 25, 30 submissions and it was all local people that we were like texting, being like, hey, you take really great pictures, send it to us. And it was like winter, so we were on her porch putting it together. We were like putting the pages and everything in order. We didn't really know what we were doing. I got a degree in design and I knew how to make a booklet, but I had to like call my friend Justin and be like, hey, how do I like open this file the right way? And he told me and I was like, cool, laters. And then like I got it from there on. So we had a zine release party. It was also Natasha's, there's missing photographs. It was also Natasha's like Tasha Palooza, the parties that I went to, so it was her birthday too. So we had a bunch of punk bands play. There's a lot of photos missing. But that was like our very first zine that we put out. We guerrilla printed it at a local community college, broke the printer, fixed it, got out of there before anybody noticed, and then we sewed the cover to it. And so the first editions were all zigzag and like really ugly, but it was really cool and punk rock. Yeah, let me open this in the other program. Is the stick still in there? Because there's so much missing. I'm sorry. Pause. Talk amongst yourself. Where is it? There we go. Okay. I have to full screen this. That thing? Okay. Yeah, where am I going? Okay. There you go. Yeah, okay, so that was like the rowdy party that we threw. We didn't know people were going to show up. It was like, you know, your mom gets your party at Chuck E. Cheese and like nobody shows up to your party and she paid for it. It was like that. And then suddenly everybody showed up. Natasha's dad was like running the door. We had a rowdy party at a Tejano gay bar on the south side called Tequila Island. It was super fun. And these are photographs from our other zine releases. And zine releases were a way for us to make it sustainable. We don't make any money off of the zine. We were able to like pay the bands and the poets that performed just from like charging $3 at the door. It was really accessible. And so we had bands play, people came out, bought zines and partied and had a really great time and like started talking and getting conversations going. And it was really awesome. These are photographs from people not from San Antonio who had like ordered our zines or been in our zines. This is like LA Zine Fest. They started wearing like our Sucia pins. We made a shirt that said like Keep Sanando Cumbia and said St. Sucia established 2014. It was like the coolest shirt we've made. But our community really in San Antonio really showed up for us. So we got accepted into LA Zine Fest and we were like, oh, we don't have money for this. We can barely like publish our zines. So we did a yard sale and we were like, donate us all your like crap that you don't want. And so people donated stuff and then they came back and bought other people's crap. It was really great. Yeah. So we sold like VHS tapes and movies. Some lady donated a bunch of clothes with cat hair on it and people bought it. It was really weird. And we were able to go to LA Zine Fest, I think 3 times after that. This is LA Zine Fest most recently. This is Chicago Zine Fest. LA Zine Fest like 2 years ago. That's local San Antonio. And we've been hosting like workshops that are free all around San Antonio and like in academic spaces. This is a little bit about my process of Natasha just writes down as we like go through submissions and select what we can publish because we only have so many pages to make like otherwise if we publish everything the price goes up on printing and it's not as efficient financially. And so we have to like really decide what we want to publish. And so her notes are just like a list of names and what they made. And my notes are kind of like a clusterfuck of like I redraw the images that are on there, like what's on the cover. And then sometimes like we don't have like things don't flow as well together. So then I move them around and now this is over here and that's where it's going now. We make lists of what we can do. If like there's a bit of a page, we take every inch of the pages we can and still make it look nice. So if a poem is really short and I can fit something underneath it, I'll throw in another poem in there like real tiny. So we just try and do the best that we can and like fitting in zines. So this is like my notebooks. And then it ends up coming out looking fancy like this. We've had contributors from all over the United States, Venezuela, Costa Rica. The Venezuelan woman was actually living in Spain at the time, and so she was writing about that and how it's affecting her. So we published 14 zines. This is, 12 of them? Yeah, so it was like the first one, second one. The second one got really more serious. This one's very sex positive, fun, and talking a lot of shit. This one had a lot to do with identity and sexuality really coming into play, and we kind of got more serious about what we were doing with the zine and where we were going, and it was all based on the submissions that we got. Like we didn't like try and guide the conversation. It was like, oh shit, like this is people we don't know are sending us like really intense material, like a lot of trauma, and we're like, okay, like they trust us to publish this. We don't even know them. We need to do them justice. And we started to get more submissions like that. And this was our 1-year anniversary issue that was all written work that we weren't able to fit in here. And then we decided to go into themes because we saw reoccurring themes in these issues that really drove the magazine to like, we need to do a reproductive health and justice like zine by itself. So we started like setting aside submissions that we got for a coming of age zine, our body issue zine, family, politics and resistance. This is after the Trump election. We were going to do a love theme and we just dropped that. Reproductive health and justice, education, and then for fun I was like, let's do something fun, please. This is a lot of trauma that we're reading and it's hurting me and my mental health. A lot of emotional labor. So we did a fun pop culture issue that came with a co-star of us as Ghostbusters. And then we went back to heavy topics and did a straight immigration issue. And for the first round of printing, we also printed a second zine that was a letter from a mother in a detention center that was translated by her daughter, telling her story of how she got there and like how like trading from one detention center to another, like how she can contact people, like just really telling her story. and we couldn't edit any of that out. So I was like, let's just make a second zine that will go with it. And we published this zine. We had like 200 of them, and then I sent 50 copies to the woman who submitted it for her to sell or do with whatever she wants, and then the digital file to follow that. So if she wanted to like sell them and make money off of them to help with her mother's lawyer fees, that would help. And then our last issue, we wanted to bring the zine to like a close because it's very exhausting. So I was like, hey, I want to stop doing the zine. And Tasha was like, you're breaking up with me? And I was like, no, I want to do other cool stuff with you. And so we decided it was a good time to like round out the zine. So we did our final issue, Soy, that came out in January. And we had a big party and we had submissions from all over. We had the most submissions, about like 375 submissions from like 150 people. It was crazy. But this was our final zine release. It was huge. Everybody came out. We had bands play and poets. But then there was kind of like this wave of sadness and also celebration that was kind of like over our digital community online, because we were coming to a close and we're like, they were like, oh no, like I didn't get to submit. And I'm like, that's not a problem. Like you can still make zines. You don't have to be in our zines. Like zines give you the power to take control of your own narrative. And so we're still going to do zine workshops and help people get a stepping stone into self-publishing. And then, how am I on time? Am I cool? Am I done? Okay. We do Zine Fest, me and Suzy. And then Zine Librarian with the Rasquacha Zine. And there it is there. That's it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So our next speaker is going to be Suzy Gonzalez. She's an artist, curator, zinester, educator, and community organizer living and working in San Anto. And she's giving attention to the origins of both food and art materials. She analyzes what it means to decolonize art and art history. She co-publishes Yes Ma'am Zine and co-organizes the San Anto Zine Fest and is half of the collective Los Mestizax. She is currently co-curating a contemporary Chicanx art exhibit that will travel from New York to San Anto late 2019 and early 2020. Suzy holds an MFA from the Rhode Island School of Design and a BFA from Texas State University.
Tough to follow Isa's energy.
I'm sorry.
Everyone breathe. All right, how's that? Okay. Hey y'all, thanks for being here. My name is Suzy Gonzalez. I guess Claudia introduced me, so you already know like kind of what I do. I don't know. I'm also a current fellow with the International Intercultural Leadership Institute, along with Noelle here. It's coming from the Bronx, yeah. And mentor right now with the NIFA Immigrant Artist Mentorship Program. So I'm here representing Yes Ma'am Zine and myself. I'm half of Yes Ma'am, along with my friend El Minter, who right now is in New Orleans for New Orleans Comic and Zine Expo, which is why I don't have like a lot of zines up here because they took all of them. So we're always kind of trying to do things. If one of us can't make it, the other one kind of tries to do that. So we went to Texas State together. Our dorms were across from each other. We became good friends. Elle was studying science, I was studying art, and we were both talking a lot about feminism. We were taking women's studies classes together, and we kind of thought, hey, we need to share all these conversations we're having with people. We need to like get it out because we can't just like, it can't just be you and me. So we started Yes Ma'am. This is kind of our mission, in like kind of bullet points. We believe in DIY publishing, so we print all of our own zines, and we also do Yes Ma'am Press, where we print other folks' zines as well. So if someone's like, I have all these poems and I don't know what to do, like we'll print it for you, and we try to do it at cost. We also screen print all of our merch, and then we believe in fourth wave feminism, which for us, we define as a social political movement highlighting the links between oppressions of all forms in order to dismantle supremacy. So for that, we also are advocates for animal rights, and we believe that like species is a part of that. We are inclusive to all who want to contribute, especially with the goal of amplifying underrepresented voices. Prefer not to use like marginalized, like so, but underrepresented is just truth, right? And then our content is women and non-binary positive, and we take kind of anything, right? So poetry, comics, artwork, photography, any kind of rants that people just need to kind of get out. And again, part of our value system is to offer our zines for free, so we try to just make it really accessible for folks. We're also into community organizing. We used to do a whole bunch of community discussions at different co-ops in Austin with Austin Free School over kind of different feminist topics, or anything from like let's see, like gay marriage to like female orgasm to like, you know, all these like chivalry, like things that we just like needed to talk to other folks about. So that's us. Our first zine release in 2012 in San Marcos, and our most recent zine fest last weekend, the New York City Feminist Zine Fest, which we love. It's like super queer friendly, and you just feel like real comfortable there. And they're getting better at like being more POC as well. So that's kind of our you can see our shift. Here are Yes Ma'am issues 1 through 12. So you can see like this DIY cut and paste is really how we got started. Abusing like the institution's printers, right? When you have it, definitely do that. You know, it's like, oh, it ran out of paper, and you got like a whole like stack of zines in your backpack. So really, you know, if you are into zines and you're like a teacher or student, like do it while you can, because it gets pricey. So we put out a call for submissions for each issue. They're all contributor based. Our first few issues were a lot more about us and like getting our ideas out. But it's really shifted to being more about uplifting other folks' voices, and kind of it's almost this like curatorial role. And then social media has really expanded the people that are submitting to Yes Ma'am. We're getting submissions from folks all over the world, and it's been really great. We're working with like a graphic designer in India now, who's like our go-to. It's like super cool, and so we're all about that. Aside from being a feminist zine, so we was kind of like a general feminist zine for a while. We went also to grad school in different states, and we kind of struggled through that and trying to like keep it going. We're like, it's not dead, we're gonna keep it going. And then we started like Sansa Sucia, like theming them. We're like, hey, there's something here, like we need to start theming. And we also noticed in theming that more folks would contribute, because you're like, oh, that's my thing, or like, oh, I have something to say about that in particular. So with issue 10, we started the vegan issue, issue 11, the body issue, and then issue 12, the dream issue. And then we also put out B-sides after 12, which is for like if someone sent us like 5 poems and we could only squeeze one of them into a zine, we've got all this extra content that's still super great. And so we try to publish everything, right? We're not good at like saying no or rejecting folks, and so we put that into like its own zine called the B-side issue. So each kind of theme is intersecting with feminist issues. So veganism, like also talking about like feminist veganism. What does that mean? The body, right? Immigration. Issue 12, yeah, is the one focusing on immigration. And the Dream issue won the Broken Pencil Zine Award. Oh, you're fine. Last year for the best political zine, and we're super proud of that. We got an interview and feature in their winter issue, and we're just really proud of our contributors, because it's all of them, you know. Let's see. Another project that we do is the microzine of microaggressions. So it's a really tiny little zine. It looks real cute, and you open it up and you get like real pissed off, like that pissed off, right? And so we have 3 volumes of that. We just put out this one last weekend in New York. And I'll just kind of, we define microaggressions as subtle, whether it's intended or not intended, comments or actions that are hostile or demeaning to someone within a particular identity group. And these casual degradations may only last for that like short moment, but are evidence of much larger systemic social issues. And so we take submissions, we say, send us under 100 words of an experience that happened to you, and we really see this as a kind of healing, cathartic process, and a way to kind of relate over shared experiences. So we're looking forward to continuing that and eventually making like a real, like a tiny little book. So some of my own personal zine projects. I did get my MFA at RISD at the Rhode Island School of Design. I was making, like, I went in there, like, making really political, like, overt work about, like, feminism and veganism and all these things, right? And I just felt very like misunderstood there, and often discouraged from making like, why is this so political? Like, this is didactic and like all these things, right? Which, you know, so I can talk about that if you want to like really dig into that. We can dig into that like over a drink. This was also like pre-election, right? And so like I do see like post-election political work as being more praised, and I'm like, damn it, I just missed it. Like, but not that that's a good thing. And I was there 2013 to 2015. My faculty was also super white, and I was essentially the like token woman of color in my class out of the 10 of us. I ended up seeking out professors outside of my faculty that I could like identify with a little more, and I ended up doing zine-oriented independent studies and proposing that. So I worked with a queer person on this and made these zines to like get through the concepts in my work. So I kind of do my visual artwork and then do zines to kind of like think through it like conceptually. So that's been super helpful for me. So these are kind of exploring like intersections of, you know, myself, of things I'm interested in, and as a way for me to just kind of rant, you know, through them. I did another independent study while I was there, the winter session before the last semester. They do like a January session. And this is a comic I made with someone in the illustration department. This was a really great way for me to kind of cope with all those difficulties, like within the institution, being that like woman of color and not feeling like always, you know, accepted. So I really loved that I could make zines within academia as a form of self-reflection and kind of like what does it mean to make an academic zine, like, and to like it's that like Nipadma, right, like to be like just like trying to break over those binaries of like fine art or what lowbrow, highbrow. So these are some clips from that comic I made that I just wanted to pull out. Back home, I love that my art could be a way to educate the public. I soon learned that didacticism was a bad word in the art world, and that kind of panel is where the title of the zine's coming from. The next one. And this, how can I be both an artist and an activist, was something I was really struggling with, like in school. Kind of like a personal struggle, I guess, but I feel like more confident about that now, and like you don't have to choose and you can do all the things, and like it is hard to, just sometimes feel like you're doing something that's like leaning to one side or the other, right? But I'm like, it's okay. And that's just, I think it's just like a constant thing, and like, that's cool. Okay, the next one. And then this was kind of a rude awakening. One would like to think that art schools are more progressive than others, when in reality they're all a part of the same systems of power, right? And so recognizing, like with my faculty, recognizing this like elitism of like the East Coast art world and being like, I don't know, I'm gonna go back home, you know, like kind of thing. Although like there's value, there's validity, like I've shown in New York and stuff, and like that's cool, but I don't know if like that to me equals success to like hunker down there. So some of my visual work, after school, I've been working on learning through unlearning, right? I'm invested in the idea of decolonizing my diet or considering the plant-based consumption of my ancestors. I use this kind of genderless silhouette to consider queerness, but also to make the figures more universally relatable and not just like about mestizaje, but like can be hopefully a reflection of just humanity. I've been working on unlearning white supremacist aesthetic, which you know, it was something that I also learned in school, is like what it was kind of being, I felt pushed on me. I've been working on asking what it means to decolonize or re-indigenize art and art history. So also as like an adjunct professor, when I have a room full of like brown and black students, being like, let's not use a textbook, like let's try to like, let's like talk about people that look like you and contemporary art, and like, well, thanks, Joanna. and so that's like one reason like why I'm into teaching. Like I don't know if that's like my forever like goal, but I'm into like being able to be that person that like I never had, you know. I'm working on what it means to be who I am right now and to be making work in this lineage of my ancestors and the history of art. This is a large-scale cornhusk collage about kind of that longing, reaching towards ancestral knowledge. I think I'm going over. So this is an example of a sculpture that I make. This is titled Chilonen, after the Aztec goddess of young corn, my way of kind of decolonizing the nude. I'm going to just skip ahead a little. recent painting based upon the Three Sisters. If you're like into gardening or you're, you know, maybe into like, you know, reclaiming indigeneity. So it's corn, beans, and squash, and I kind of personify them here. These are known as companion species. So the corn stalk grows, the beans vine up them, and then the squash leaves like shade the soil. It's this really beautiful thing, which they kind of work together to help each other grow. And I think that's something like we can really learn if we just look at the earth. Like all the answers are there, right? So I use acrylic, so I use kind of the husk to consider indigeneity. I use acrylic paint to consider the Mexican origins of that medium. We look at like Mexican muralists and acrylic paint as being like originating there. And then lastly, I use oil paint to kind of recognize the European parts of my identity. In doing decolonial work, I think it's easy for us to like feel contempt and hate towards Europe and those parts of us, but I also know that if I hate that part of me, then I'm not practicing self-love, right? So I'm just trying to like embrace all the parts, right? So along with considering like what food is going into my body, I'm really into considering the meaning behind the materials that I'm using and their origins. And so the kind of most current project that I'm working on within Zines is the Chicana Vegan Zine. This is the first issue was mostly me, like I'm gonna just make this thing and get it out there. And then the second one was more contributor based, and I'm gonna make a third issue this year, and I keep telling people that to like hold myself accountable. So keep an eye out for call for submissions and send things my way if you're interested. So this is kind of something that you can find. So it's about kind of veganizing traditional Mexican food, although my mom's fideo was always vegan. It's like accidental. And then also, I'll go to the next one. Recommended reading. I'm really into recommending reading to folks. These are some really great texts from other kind of POC folks discussing veganism, decolonization, relationships between human and animal rights that I would highly recommend, especially Afroism, if y'all haven't read that. It's so good. And then, of course, I have my own kind of political opinions that I, of course, infuse in there because what are zines for if not to kind of voice ourselves, right? And so they might not always be popular opinions, but I need to say it, right? It needs to be said for myself. And then lastly, I'm just going to end with some recent upcoming events you can find Yes Ma'am and Chicana Vegan at. We just did the NYC Feminist Zine Fest. Elle's at NoCas right now. We're going to do this middle school art workshop in Austin coming up. LA Zine Fest, that's last year's poster, but we're doing that. Denver, Elle's going because I can't go. And then San Antonio Zine Fest, October 5th.
October 5th.
Yeah, come out, y'all. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So Maribel Falcón is a Tejana Creatrix. I always like that term. Currently based in Austin, Texas. In 2013, she received her BA from the University of Texas at Austin in Sociology and Latin American Studies. She's co-founder and collective member of Cósmica, an art collective made of Mujeres who teach workshops, make zines, and curate art shows of emerging artists. Her artwork tends to convey political messaging and indigenous-based spirituality, and has been featured in Remezcla and Bitch magazine.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you.
Woo! Okay, nobody fall asleep yet. We're almost done. What is it? Oh, yeah. My name is Maribel Falcón. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, everybody, for coming today and for the conference. I'm part of Cósmica. Those are some places you can find me. We are an art collective, 3 of us now. And we make zines, we table events, we organize events, we curate shows, we host workshops. So those are some things we do. I'm going to talk a little bit about this history of us because even Isa was like, can you talk about like Cósmica, because I know you like as a personal friend and I don't even know how it started because I don't know. But we started in August of 2014. These are some images of our first art show, and really we just like, I don't know, it was like the summertime. Sorry, Barbara's here. She's like a collective member too, so I'm gonna look at her to confirm these things. But we were like at a coffee shop and we just like wanted to make art and show it. And so we were like, oh, we should just make art and show it. And so that's what we did. And we all made pieces of our own, the ones that organized the event. And then we asked like other women artists like in New York, because this was in Brooklyn, to contribute. And mostly our medium is collage. I mean, we have a range of mediums, but that was a lot of the artwork that was in that show. And it was successful. Like, a lot of people showed up. We had like donations for food and drink. We had music, and we were like, oh, we should make a zine of all the pieces in the show for everybody who comes. And that's what we did, that Lauren's tabling at. And it's kind of the first part of the story. We also made an installation at the show of like a young girl's room. So we put books that we would read, and like kind of a little table and desk, and art we'd have on the walls, and we had this notebook that people could go and sign. And it was just like to show like how we make creativity in our sacred space of like a room, you know, like in our safe space. And yeah, it's a little installation. There's another pic of the show. There's a pic of us in our first scene. Let's see. And then after that, we were like, oh, okay, well, we should keep doing this, because a lot of people showed up and liked it and felt some kind of connection to what we were talking about as Cósmica. And so then that fall, I like applied for Allied Media Conference, and I thought we were applying for like just one workshop, but I applied so early that we ended up being like part of the organizers of a whole tract of art. So this is like a picture of one of the workshops. We ended up giving like 4 workshops at the conference. We had to organize, we had to like take in submissions. It was a huge deal. But it was really funny because it wasn't at first my intention. I was like, oh, I want to do 1 workshop, and then we like did 4. We also bought like 50 of these like art panels. We're like, oh, 50 will work for that, for the whole weekend. And like the first workshop, they were completely gone. So it was kind of like showing that people want to be creative. Is something that we promote and have in our mission, that like everybody has the capacity to be creative. You need to tap into it and nourish it. And so that was like, we did a gift workshop, we did a self-portrait as collage workshop. I give that, and we did a political social justice workshop. And so that was one of the participants, and she's really cute, and she still like keeps in touch with us. It's adorable. Also, as a collective, we really focus on young, like feminine energy, young girls or self-identified women, because as women ourselves, we just feel like, I mean, we don't have to say all the ways in which we're oppressed, but we want to focus on that creativity and nourishing that like spirit within us, especially for young feminine spirits. This one's really embarrassing, but I'm going to show it because it's one of our zines. We did a baby girl's dreams, and which is what we're talking about, like nourishing this like young part of us. Because when you're young, you're creative, but nobody says you're an artist. You know, I didn't take any art classes in school. I didn't have access to art classes. Like nobody told me I could be an artist. And but when you're young, you do make art. You know, you write in your journal. You like take, you know, you do your little thing. You can't really read it, but it's like favorite singer, you know, Salinas. Like things when I was 14. Who's your crush? Banana. Can't tell you who it was. It's a code word. Favorite celebrity? Ashanti. Okay. You know, like we all did pages. This is just my page, and then like emo journaling, I did like, what is reality? Is there a definition? I think not. If so, I'm totally unaware of it. That was when I was 14, but I probably would say that now. So, we all just made pages, and it was really cute to like see people's process, and the other pages are really cute too. I don't have a copy of Baby Girl Dreams, but I have some other copies of our things for you to look at. This was Art Girl Dreams. This was like how we like defined ourselves as an artist, like the process we went through to say, okay, I'm an artist. And so we like got submissions from other women artists, like around, like not locally, but like through social networks, through Instagram, that we knew were making art that would want to participate. And so I have a copy of that one. You're welcome to look at it. And we really like Ana Mendieta, you know, my artist, the way to reestablish the bonds that tie me to the universe. So just a pic. Then we have Manita Zine. Manitas was an art show that we did in Sacramento, California, with ChifladaZine, like a nonprofit community space that really support us. And yeah, it was the theme of sisters. So like when you call your sister Manita, and the whole theme was that, and people and different artists contributed. We solicited them and asked them to contribute. And there's just like one pic of the gallery, but we made the whole show into a zine as well, and I have a copy of that too. These are other zines we made, Cósmica Volume number 2. The first one was the show. This is the second one of just artwork we had made since the show. And then a Cósmica quotes of just like different artists or prominent women and things that they said that inspired us to come in zine. And we have ChifladaZine coming out. I'm making it, so keep tuned. This is the cover and a piece in there. And then this is some of my artwork. It's like collage, digital collage and analog collage. Yeah. Some of Barbara's artwork that she made for the Manita show. This is like some new work of hers. Yeah, I didn't want to talk too long because I feel like our conversation could pull out a lot of good information. But I have some zines here for you to look at. There's some tote bags too. I don't know if anyone's interested, but yeah, feel free to talk to me afterwards or us later. Thank you.
Thanks. So our last speaker, Daisy Salinas is a San Antonio based Chicana feminist, zinester, punk musician, festival curator, activist, and poet. That's a lot. You're tired. She obtained her BA in English from Middle Tennessee State University and an MA in Multicultural Women's Studies from Texas Women's University. Through her independent publication, Muchacha Fanzine, Daisy uses zines to amplify the voices of marginalized artists of color. Along with zine making, Daisy also co-founded the decolonial feminist punk collective Chiconas in the Pit. She sings, plays bass with the punk band Frijolera Riot, and performed poetry with the bilingual poetry collective Wake Up, women artistically collecting experiencias.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Daisy Salinas, and thank you for having me. So I'm the founder of Muchacha Fanzine, and it's an independent Chicana feminist publication dedicated to promoting social consciousness and decolonizing minds. And it started out as a punk zine, and then from there it's grown the last 8 years into a larger compilation that's become an essential space for creatives of color internationally. So it's definitely been a journey. Okay, so I was born in Edinburgh, Texas in the RGV. Anyone from there? Yay, okay. But then I grew up in Middle Tennessee. I was the only brown kid and like one of the only ones in my school and in my neighborhood. And other than Serena Quintanilla, God rest her soul, I did not see myself reflected in mainstream culture at all. And I experienced racism growing up as one of the only children of color. Okay, and then I found solace in punk. I was like a total Blink-182 poser when I was like 13, 14. So I had a lot of anger, and punk was the healthiest way for me to express it. When I was 15, my dad bought me a guitar, and my dream was to become a musician. And I was really creative. I would play guitar, I would sing, I would write poetry and short stories, make collage art, but I would hardly share it with anybody. And I was really taught, like, if you, in order to be an artist, you have to be special, you have to be chosen. And then as I grew into my mid to late teens, I got more and more into punk, and everything about it excited me, from the aggressive music, and I would go to shows like every weekend, the mosh pits, crowd surfing, mohawks, tattoos, but I was more into the different aspects as far as anti-authority, rebellion, do-it-yourself ethic. I became part of the Nashville punk scene. I was really inspired how bands created their own DIY independent music culture outside the mainstream. And I always wanted to create my own culture, but I still saw myself as more just a fan and a support role. And this is because of sexism and the punk and rock. So I had internalized sexism because I did not see myself reflected. As you can see, all the rock magazines, Rolling Stone, just had white men on the cover. Within the rock world, the top 100 guitarists were mostly men. And so I remember going to shows, and 9 out of the 10 times it was an all-male white punk band. And I didn't even question it. I was just like the girlfriends or the support role of the band, and it was just totally normalized. Then I discovered Riot Girl. So I didn't become introduced to feminism or zines in any way until I discovered Riot Girl. And it was, Riot Girl was a feminist punk rock movement that occurred in the early 90s. There's a Bikini Kills Girl Power zine, and Girl Germs by Van Bratmobile. And so I was introduced by Riot Girl, to Riot Girl by a black skater girl in my class. She had a Riot Girl tattoo, and I wanted to be just like her. And finally, all those experiences of sexism and limiting myself to the support role were politicized. I was really moved how they speak about issues such as sexual assault, domestic violence, sizeism, sexism in punk, and more. Okay, but my dilemma was I became really interested in feminism and Riot Girl, that's me in the middle, and my passion was completely, met with complete backlash in the Nashville punk scene. My politics were not embraced. When I tried to throw my first benefit for sexual assault survivors, I was told that that would do nothing to help survivors. I was told that I was trying to make women look weak, that I was bashing men. White women took the men's side, and I was bullied for weeks on an online message board, and I was completely broken because this scene was my whole life, and it's what I lived and breathed, and so I became really disillusioned with trying to fit into this scene that claimed to be all-inclusive, and it really wasn't. So the next thing I did, I felt the most punk scene, the biggest fuck you, would be the most punk thing to do was just to create Muchacha fanzine as an FU to the whole scene, and it was everything to me. I no longer felt the desire to be validated by the white punks in the community, and I reclaimed punk for myself. I started moving away from the supporter role more to an active producer role, and I made my first 2 Muchacha zines in undergrad in the school computer lab, like Suzy talked about, abusing the resources. I did that too, and scanned and printed a bunch of zines and then gave them out for free at punk shows, and they were all about Riot Girl, punk, and feminism. Those were my 2 first issues. And then I became really inspired by Zinesters of color, and I was realizing that a lot of the Riot Girl zines I was reading were mostly written by white women, and women of color voices weren't always included. And so due to the lack of representation, I started researching Zinesters of color. And so this is Evolution of a Race Riot by Mimi Nguyen, and then also Fix My Head. So Evolution of a Race Riot is pivotal, and it is really critical of the Riot Girl scene and the DIY white punk scene. And so in my search, it was really difficult to find more zines by people of color. I couldn't really find that many in the internet. A lot of zine distributors and distros barely had any zines by people of color. And then Seattle-based artist Nikki Gomez felt the same, and so she started Brown Recluse Zine Distro as a means to make people of color zines more visible and widely available. And so fast forward 6 years later, and zines by people of color have blown up, and it's because of distros like Brown Recluse Zine Distro, festivals like San Antonio Zine Fest, who had to take matters into their own hands so that our zines are represented. And so it's been a really transformative experience for me to connect with other zinesters of color, trade zines with them. And we've always been around, we're just not documented, archived, or represented. And punk culture and DIY culture is often associated with straight white guys, but that's not the case at all. We've always been doing it ourselves before DIY culture was ever a thing. And so another reason that I make zines, or one of the biggest ones, is for resistance purposes. So Muchacha fanzine's content promotes social justice issues such as intersectional feminism, immigrant rights, LGBTQ liberation, POC solidarity, anti-capitalism, prisoner rights, environmental justice, body positivity, and decolonizing travel. And especially with the fascist Trump regime in power, destroying our families and environment, I think zines are a form of resistance against the capitalist white supremacist patriarchy. And then I'm also very interested in zine aesthetics, and so that's what really also got me into zines. And I'm really influenced by punk cut and paste technique, and where images and words and designs are cut from a variety of sources like magazines, flyers, internet images, then creatively compiled onto the page. And the different aesthetics like handwritten style and tape and whiteout, it has the effect of inspiring others that a zine is relatively easy to make, anybody can do it. So for instance, when I first began reading ragdoll zines, there was spelling errors, there was whiteout, there was doodles, and so it made me feel like I could do that. I did not have to produce something that looked aesthetically perfect or sounded perfect, but rather something that I could just spontaneously create in the moment. So these accessible qualities of DIY zines are really important because I think it encourages us to be active producers of culture instead of passive consumers. Zines are also a great way to build community and healing. They're a great form for healing. So zines have been my therapy the past 8 years. They're a therapeutic way to share, struggles that you're going through from racism, sexism, abuse, culture, and to begin healing with other people instead of alone. Okay, and so also I'm a festival curator, so I organize festivals. And so I started doing this about the same time that I started publishing zines. And so I think just the same way that I use zines as a creative platform for marginalized artists is also very similar to the way that I curate festivals. And so one of the festivals I did this for was Brown Queen, and Brown Queen was a Latina issue. I did a worldwide call out for Latina identified people around the world, and it was probably like 50-something pages, so it was pretty thick. I didn't reject anything, so it was a really long zine. And then I did the Brown Queen Festival, which was intended to honor, celebrate, and support the cultural contributions and talents of rising local Latina and other women of color artists. So Latina women, other women of color came from across Texas. It was when I was living in Denton, Texas at the time. So that was that one. And then another one I participated in was for the San Antonio Four. So I heard about the San Antonio Four, which were 4 Latina lesbian women that were imprisoned for almost 15 years under false accusations and unfair litigation. So there was an event going on in San Antonio called 4 Cities for Justice, where artists were gathering throughout Texas so that they could raise money for a documentary being made about them, which is now called Southwest of Salem. So I was invited to release my zine. I did a zine reading, and it was a really powerful event. I ended up mailing my zine to the women in prison, and then we started exchanging letters with each other. And they've all been exonerated by now, so. And then another one I did was about reproductive justice. So I released Nuestros Cuerpos, Our Bodies. I examined reproductive justice in Texas. This was in 2013 during the year of Wendy Davis's filibuster, when the fight for reproductive justice was getting really dire. Abortion clinics were being closed everywhere. It's still just as bad, especially in the Valley in South Texas as well. So we benefited Cicada Collective. I had my 3rd FemFest benefit, and they were a Denton POC queer-run reproductive justice organization. So I did the zine release, and we had the festival. So I would always keep going back to music while I was making zines, and I just felt that music was the most powerful way to enact social change, but I just felt like I couldn't do it, and so I kept, having the feeling of being like the 15-year-old, or like only like Chicana, like in an all like white male show, feeling that my involvement would always be limited to the sidelines, being a fan, being a girlfriend of a musician, or a supporting role to an all-male band. And then I discovered Alice Bag from the Bags, and so I discovered her music, and then I read her autobiography, Violence Girl, from East LA Rage to Hollywood Stage. And so the line that resonated most with me in the whole book was, quote, she was talking about this guy she was dating in the 70s in the East LA punk scene. She said, quote, as I was sitting there talking to the guy, I realized that everything we were talking about was related to him, and I realized that I didn't want to cater to the rock star. I really felt like I wanted to be the rock star, end quote. So that was the biggest hallelujah light bulb moment in my life. After that, I said, fuck it. I committed to never being on the sidelines again. I got a bass guitar, learned bass, and I started playing music. So that's my band's Frijolera Riot. I've been playing music for about 3 years now. I also curated the festival Chiconas in the Pit, which is now a collective. And so we're a decolonial feminist punk collective in San Antonio aimed at creating a network of safe radical music spaces. And so this was a mosh pit last weekend at our 4th festival, Afro Punk in the Pit. And so it's been really great way to create spaces for marginalized artists of color in San Antonio and throughout Texas. So we're uniting a lot of Black, Brown, and Native artists in the San Antonio area. So in conclusion, whether it be through my zine, my band, or my collective. Independent DIY art has always been my way to try to make the world a little bit better for the youth, for the next generation. And so I'm really glad that my younger self didn't give up on punk. And I never stopped reclaiming it for myself and for my people. Okay, and then the last one here is we made, the 5 of us made a zine called Don't Mess with Tejanas. That's right there. And so you can purchase it online here at this link at gumroad.com/L/Don't Mess with Tejanas Zine.
It's a free download, but you can donate. But we have copies here for sale.
Yeah.
So if you want to get it.
So if you want to support us.
This helps pay for our gas home.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're just going to ask a couple more questions amongst each other to finish out the presentation. So our first question, so this is for the Zinesters, is what is Texas's unique role in zine history?
I can go. So we started organizing, started doing our zines, and found out like Suzy was doing zines, and we started getting together with like La Liga, and we're like, we should have a zine fest. But since then, Dr. Tomas Ibarra, also in the back, had created the Latino collection at the San Antonio Public Library, and so I go there to like look at stuff and like explore and be inspired. And I've like really just realized like we're just a continuation of papers and publishing that have happened since like especially like the 60s. Like I'm just pulling stuff off the shelf and just blowing through it and being like, oh, this is cool, I really like this, and making scans and taking home and like reading stuff. And so we're really just a continuation of stuff that has already been created. Like specifically in San Antonio, there was lots of like independent newspapers for neighborhoods. Like even like I found out about the Alizan Apache like courts. It was like a courts where low income people lived. They had their own newspaper. And so I really felt like we're just a continuation of that. And luckily we have that resource available to the public that I can just like go through and get weird with. And so like San Anto Zine Fest, it's Santa Sucia, Yes Ma'am Zine, La Liga, and who else?
Isabel.
Huh?
And Isabel.
Isabel's with La Liga now, basically. But like we're kind of like curating the space where Emma at the library, she's really opened up like that space to us and making it accessible where we get that space for free so we could host a zine fest. So then we have money left over to really invite all of these people that we've met along the way doing zines, like not only in our city, but like people in the Southwest region, La Horchata Zine in DC, people we met in Oakland, and really just trying to like curate these spaces and then collect these zines to like continue on, like with the zine library, continue on what Dr. Tomas has done. So we're just a continuation, and we have social media, so it's maybe like it feels like it's more out there now because we're just like tweeting and Instagramming and posting and sharing. But like this has been happening for a long time, and Texas feels like a really awesome hub because we're not like on the East Coast or the West Coast. So we're just kind of like, well, we'll do our own fucking thing and like ignore what's going on over there. So it's fun. Yeah.
So I'm going to go to the next question. Thank you, Isa. Sorry. So how do zines radicalize the concept of the book?
I did the last one.
Well, we don't have to get anybody to approve it to publish it. So like I love it because it's like, I don't know, people stress about getting their book published. I'm like, you could just do it yourself. Like you just put in a little booklet and like our zines are archived in the libraries. Like I know a lot of our zines are purchased by major institutions, so I mean, like what's the difference except for that I don't have to get a publisher to approve it or accept what I want to say, and like we can say whatever we want, we can print whatever we want. I mean, it's not extremist or violent inducing, but I mean, I think it's just as good as like paperback on the shelf.
I think that's like the most empowering part is you don't need that validation. You only need like your own validation, and like that's what I try to tell other folks to like you just do it, that DIY. Yeah,
I think it's like unlearning what gets to count as knowledge. And so like I've been unlearning that the whole time I've ever been publishing zines, and not needing, like you're saying, validation for publishing companies. Also not having to censor yourself is really important, because even in grad school I would have to censor myself all the time. and it was just like regurgitating a bunch of academic jargon, whereas in a zine, I can talk about what really matters to me without feeling like I have to compromise it.
And I think whether you're conscious of it or not, it's anti-capitalist, right? And it's like we're creating like our own kind of like economies, right? And like you buy something and then someone buys something for you, you're like, oh, we should just trade it, you know, like, and it's like that kind of like money that's like us like supporting each other in a lot of ways.
As a bookseller, I have a bookstore in Santa Ana, and I know some of you already. Your validation is all the youth that come looking for your zines, and you become relevant role models and inspire other youth to create their own zine. And so I want to applaud all of you for that, because you know, I have young chicanitas that are coming in like, oh, do you have this person? You have to get their zine, you know, and so there's this mass fan base for y'all, and it's affordable, you know, and that's the best part, because a lot of folks cannot afford books, but they can afford your zines.
And not to dismiss books or writers, because they are just as important in everything. And like, if zines aren't better, they're just, we're able to do so with less money and more autonomy. So
Yeah, they're more accessible to us.
To let this kind of idea of market. So do you identify as a creative entrepreneur?
yeah, I saw that question.
I think so. When we were doing the zine, we were like, oh shit, like we have a lump of money from like the zine sales, we need to put it somewhere. And so we had to get a bank account and put it there. And then people were like, hey, where can I get this? And we're like, I guess we'll sell them online. And so we had to create an online store. And it was a lot of us like figuring stuff out. And so me as an artist, I was like, I already had an online store for my posters and stuff. But Natasha's a full-time nurse, and so I handle all the store stuff. But we just try and make it accessible as possible. But it's also like having to call a bookstore in Austin and saying, you know, hey, we've run out of this. Someone's looking for this. Do you have it? And really learning how to like talk to other folks, put things online, and then market them with like Instagram. And just so like, hey, this is made. It exists. It's there if you want it. Just trying to figure out that. And I took like one marketing class in college for credit, and it helped out. But it's like, it's still stuff that you could easily go on like Marketing 101 and Google that. Like all of what we do, like bookmaking is all like Googleable now. You just take a YouTube video and watch it and you're like, cool, got it. So learning how to sell it has been pretty easy.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So what role do zines play in institutional learning, if at all?
Well, there has been more and more kind of schools like approaching, like I know Santa Sucia a whole lot, like approaching us and like wanting to do workshops and that kind of thing. And our first thing is like, how much are y'all paying us? And like trying to just, I think, give ourselves credit and like have that confidence and like we're doing a good thing and like this shouldn't be taken advantage of just because it's not like a, you know, like fancy painting in a white wall gallery, you know, kind of like art. And so there's that. But I definitely, like someone who's like gone to, you know, grad school or whatever, like appreciate that it's being a part of that, you know, that it's like infusing into that, and then like youth are becoming influenced. I mean, that's kind of next generation or like, you know, still millennials, I guess, like doing, like being inspired to maybe start up their own thing like that.
Yeah, and I think artists of color really need to be compensated for our work as creators of culture, and I think it's long overdue, like recognition and reparations and everything. And I feel like we deal with so much and we're not taken seriously a lot of the time. So I think it's really important to compensate artists of color. And I feel like it's a definition of entitlement not to.
Also, it was teachers of color that put us on their syllabus that got us into an academic realm where we were getting a bunch of orders from the same place in California. We're like, it's a book club? I don't know. But then we've actually checked our email, and it was a professor who had picked up our zine while she was visiting San Antonio, and her friend was like, hey, you need to read this. And so she went back and was going to teach a Chicana gender studies class and was like, I need to include zines in my syllabus. So she had us with like Third Woman Press, and we were the cheapest book like in like that for that semester of any of the students. It was like $7, or I think Third Woman Press had like a PDF download that they were getting. But they introduced contemporary women of color artists and zine making into their academic realm. So when we did like a zine tour, we were able, through California, got to do a guest lecture. And they gave us pizza and lemonade, and we hung out, and it was really cool. And now we're at the space where we're just like, hey, we need to be more compensated. So like when we went to Texas A&M Corpus Christi a couple weeks ago, they paid for our hotel. We got a stipend. We did like a whole 2-hour workshop. They took us to dinner, and it was like, yes, like this is nice. But it started with teachers of color saying, hey, something's missing, and I found something. Also, now let's pay these people to come out here because they're missing work just to be here. And so it's been a real journey of like understanding like what our worth is, because it was just like, oh, I make zines and we fold paper and it's cool. And then now it's like, oh, okay, there's an academic breakdown of this and now they want me to speak on it. Should I charge? Like, how much do I charge? So it's been a whole learning process getting into institutions, because I know there's like a book institutional fee when you like get a book through the library. And so we've been acquired by some libraries and archives, and we're just like $7, like it's cool, but apparently there's so much that we don't know. So it's been a whole learning process for everything.
So I just wanted to share that I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you to everyone that shared, and especially Isabel. I'm a librarian at a community college in San Antonio, and I introduce information literacy through zines, and it's really taken off. And I'm collaborating with faculty members by helping them design assignments to youth with zines, because the thing is, a lot of the intro classes, the instructors will require them to pull 5 to 7 peer review articles, and it's so overwhelming. They don't see themselves in this work, and so having them create a zine as a reflective piece or a how-to guide, there's so many options, and because of people like you, Isabel, and everyone on this panel, I'm sharing it on my campus, and and it's only been a short time, and so if anybody in the audience has just that spark, just do it. Like you were saying, just do it. And I'm doing instructional like search strategies, Boolean operators, stuff like that, like library stuff, like citations, and the students are like, okay, like I see it because I'm visually explaining it, and I want to prepare them to be better researchers, that to evaluate your sources, to all that good stuff. But I hope to make a zine. A day in the life of a librarian of color.
Yeah.
So thank you for that comment. And our last and final question, and then go out into the wind. What are your hopes for the future of zines?
I hope that someone can look back on Tejana Zinesters the way that we look back on Riot Girls. Mm-hmm. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
And be like, that was a movement, and it's still happening, and that just I didn't think that was a thing until Claudia, you invited us to this and are validating us as an art form, and okay, whoa, art history, that's a part of it, and I didn't really consider that before.
I hope that there's a very accessible, even digitized archive, the Latino collections. It's there. We're already some of our zines are already barcoded. That was such a big deal to be barcoded in San Antonio Public Library, because me and Natasha both went as kids and would fill milk crates full of books, and then knowing we're barcoded and on a shelf and really physically taking up space, that there's rows of books of the weight of all the zines, that's something that's very magical, and really hoping to expand on that people start to, if they've never collected zines before, that they, that piques their interest, because there's something for everyone. And so really just people individually building a catalog of their own library, and that folks who are there'll still be underrepresented folks in the future, no matter what, somebody's going to get lost there, and hopefully they see zines as a powerful source to tell their own stories, and that they take up physical space in all archives everywhere, not just specifically Latino archives, but American archives. That there's we're in a zine library in Spain, and I've never seen it, but I know the name of it in an email. But I'm just we're out there, somebody out there knows we exist, and that's dope. So hopefully everybody feels seen and heard. That's what I hope.
My hope is that women of color are supported when we're alive, because I feel like a lot of women of color We're like romanticized and like worshipped when we're dead, and I feel like we're hardly supported or archived when we're alive. So I want to change that for the next generation of women of color artists and zinesters.
Great. I think that's a good place to end. Oh, there was last
just a comment that it is great, like everything that you do, because I think I'm in one of those scenes, but like it was just amazing to like submit, and then I didn't realize like at one point I started seeing like Horchata scene like go all over to like the different like festivals, and I was like, man, that's really cool that like everyone gets to see your work in other places, and you make it like go other places, right? So like what you are doing is pretty great, like, and for artists, like giving that resource to other people. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for contributing to the zine. Okay, well, thank you so much for staying, and have a great weekend. Good job, Claudia. Good job. We did it. Yeah.